All right, buckle up, because what you're about to hear is not your typical K-pop headline. This is a story about respect, legacy, and the kind of raw honesty that only a legend like Psy can deliver. We're talking about the man who literally broke the internet with Gangnam Style, the first YouTube video to ever hit 1 billion views, the godfather of K-pop's global explosion. And when he decides to open his mouth about the 7 members of BTS, you better believe the entire industry stops and listens. But here's the thing, Psy didn't just throw out generic compliments. No, he went deep. He pointed out things about each member that even some armies never fully appreciated. Why did Psy single out one member's stage presence as something he's never seen in 20 years of performing? Which BTS member made Psy have to admit he felt genuinely intimidated, not as a competitor, but as a fellow artist? And what was the one comment Psy made that left an entire interview panel in absolute silence? If you think you know everything about BTS, think again, because today we're counting down from number 7 to number 1. And trust me, that number 1 spot, it's going to hit different. Let's get into it. Number 7, J-Hope, the energy that made Psy rewind the tape. You know what's crazy? When you think about Psy, a man who has performed in front of literally millions of people across the globe, a guy who headlined concerts from Seoul to Times Square, who danced so hard on stage that security guards thought he was having a medical emergency, you'd think nothing in the performance world could genuinely catch him off guard anymore. But here's where it gets interesting, because when Psy was asked during a Korean broadcast segment about BTS's stage energy, he didn't hesitate, didn't stall, didn't give one of those polite senior artist diplomatic answers. He went straight for Jung Sok, our J-Hope, and what he said genuinely made the hosts lean forward in their chairs. Psy pointed out something that most casual viewers completely miss, but every performer in the industry secretly knows. J-Hope doesn't just dance on stage, he transmits energy like a human electrical current. And Psy, being someone who built his entire career on the concept of infectious energy, recognized that immediately. He said that watching J-Hope perform was like watching someone who had figured out the secret formula that he himself had spent over a decade trying to master, the ability to make every single person in a 60,000-seat stadium feel like the performance was happening just for them. Now, let's break that down for a second, because that is not a small statement coming from Psy. This is the man who choreographed the horse dance, a move so universally catchy that presidents, grandmothers, and toddlers on every continent were doing it within weeks of Gangnam Style dropping. Psy understood virality before the word even became mainstream. He understood the mechanics of how a performer's body language translates through a screen, through a stadium, through a tiny phone screen on someone's commute. And for him to look at J-Hope and say, "That guy figured it out," is essentially the highest compliment a performance-based artist can receive from a senior in the Korean entertainment industry. But what really made this moment stand out wasn't just the compliment itself, it was the context. See, J-Hope's journey to becoming BTS's undeniable performance anchor wasn't some overnight fairy tale. Before BTS, Hoseok was a street dancer from Gwangju, a city while culturally rich, is nowhere near the entertainment epicenter of Seoul. He won a national dance competition as a teenager, which caught the attention of talent scouts. But when he first arrived at Big Hit Entertainment, now Hybe, he wasn't even being trained as a rapper or a vocalist. He was a dancer, period. And in the K-pop trainee system, being just a dancer is one of the most precarious positions you can be in, because companies can replace dancers far more easily than they can replace a main vocal or a visual center. Hoseok knew this. He talked about it in interviews years later, about how he would stay in the practice room until 2, 3 in the morning, not just perfecting choreography, but teaching himself to rap, forcing his voice to carry emotion in ways that felt authentic rather than manufactured. He cried, a lot. He considered leaving the company more than once. There's a well-documented moment from BTS's early trainee days where the members themselves weren't sure if the group would ever debut, and J-Hope was one of the members most affected by that uncertainty. But here's the thing that Psy picked up on, and this is what separates a casual observer from a true industry veteran. J-Hope took all of that fear, all of that uncertainty, all of that pressure of being a kid from a non-entertainment city trying to survive in the most competitive idol system on the planet, and he didn't suppress it. He converted it. He turned it into the very thing that makes his stage presence so electric. When J-Hope hits a stage, there's an almost desperate joy in his movements. Not desperate in a negative way, but desperate like someone who knows exactly how close they came to never having this moment, and they are going to squeeze every last drop of life out of every second they have in front of that audience. Psy recognized that, because Psy lived it. People forget that before Gangnam Style, Psy was considered a has-been in the Korean music industry. He'd had moderate hits, sure, but he was in his mid-30s in an industry that worships youth, and multiple people in the business had written him off.
When Gangnam Style exploded, it wasn't just a hit, it was vindication for every artist who had ever been told their window had closed. So when Psy watched J-Hope perform, he wasn't just watching a talented dancer, he was watching a kindred spirit, someone who performed with the intensity of a person who understood that the stage is not a guarantee, it's a gift. And that recognition, that moment of one performer seeing their own fire reflected in another performer from a completely different generation, that's the stuff that transcends genre, transcends era, transcends the usual senior-junior dynamics of K-pop. Psy also noted something technically specific that a lot of fans might not catch: J-Hope's ability to switch performance registers in real time. What does that mean? It means that J-Hope can go from a hard-hitting hip-hop cypher where every move is sharp, aggressive, and grounded to a pop-forward group choreography where the energy is bright, synchronized, and fan service heavy, and he does it without any visible transition. There's no warm-up period, no awkward adjustment phase. He just shifts, like changing a channel, and the new frequency is immediately at full power. Psy compared this to what he called broadcast muscle memory, something that only artists who have spent thousands of hours on stage develop: the ability to read a room, read a camera, and adjust your entire physical output in a fraction of a second. And J-Hope, according to Psy, had that ability at a level that was almost unsettling for someone his age, because most performers don't develop that kind of instinct until they've been in the industry for well over a decade. J-Hope had it within his first few years of performing with BTS. So yeah, number 7 on our list, and it's already hitting this hard. J-Hope, the energy converter, the stage electrician, the guy who made Psy sit back and say, how does he do that? But trust me, we're just warming up. Because if you think Psy's comments about J-Hope were surprising, wait until you hear what he said about the next member on our list. And let me just tell you, it involves a word that Psy has almost never used to describe another artist in public. Curious? You should be.
Number 6. Jin, the confidence that left Psy completely speechless. Okay, let's be real for a second. In the world of K-pop, there are idols who are talented, there are idols who are hardworking, and then there are idols who walk into a room and somehow rearrange the gravitational field so that everything orbits around them without them even trying. And if you're an ARMY, you already know exactly who I'm talking about. Kim Seok-jin, the eldest member of BTS, the self-proclaimed worldwide handsome, the man who turned confidence into an art form so refined that even Psy, the king of unapologetic self-expression, had to stop and acknowledge it. Now here's the thing, when Psy talked about Jin, he didn't go where you'd expect. He didn't start with the visuals, didn't start with the voice, didn't start with the variety show charm. He started with something that genuinely surprised everyone listening. Psy talked about bravery. Yeah, bravery. And not bravery in the dramatic, battlefield sense, Bravery in the sense of an artist who decided very early on that he was going to be unapologetically himself in an industry that is architecturally designed to sand down every unique edge you have until you fit neatly into a marketable mold. Psy pointed out that Jin's worldwide handsome persona, the one that makes him blow kisses at cameras, introduce himself with that iconic phrase at press conferences in front of the entire global media, and crack dad jokes on live broadcasts watched by millions, that persona isn't a gimmick, it's a strategy. And Psy, being someone who built his entire global brand on the strategy of controlled absurdity, recognized it immediately for what it was: genius-level audience psychology, wrapped in a layer of humor so thick that most people never even realize they're being expertly managed. Let's rewind the clock for a second, because to truly understand why Psy's observation was so sharp, you need to understand where Jin came from. Kim Sek-jin was not a trainee from childhood. He didn't grow up in dance academies. He didn't spend years grinding through the underground music scene. Jin was a film and acting student at Konkuk University, one of South Korea's prestigious institutions, when he was literally scouted off the street by a big-hit entertainment casting manager who saw him stepping off a bus. A bus! The story sounds almost too cinematic to be real, but it's one of the most well-documented origin stories in BTS history. Jin was scouted purely on visuals, brought into a company that was preparing to debut a hip-hop-focused idol group, and suddenly found himself surrounded by members who had been training in dance and music for years. RM was already a respected underground rapper. Suga had been producing music since his teens. J-Hope was a national-level dancer, and Jin? Jin could barely keep up with basic choreography in the early days. There are trainee evaluation videos where you can see the gap, not because Jin lacked talent, but because he was starting from a fundamentally different place than everyone else. And this is where Psy's comment about bravery becomes razor-sharp in its accuracy, because most people in Jin's position would have done one of two things: either quietly shrink into the background and accept a secondary role within the group, or overcompensate by trying to be something they weren't, burning out in the process. Jin did neither. He looked at the situation, assessed his strengths with a clarity that honestly borders on terrifying for someone that young, and made a decision that would define not just his career, but his entire identity within BTS. He was going to be the heart. Not the best dancer, not the most prolific songwriter, not the most technically explosive performer, the heart, the member who held the emotional center together, the one who cooked meals for the group when they were still sharing a cramped apartment and eating ramyeon for dinner 4 nights a week, the one who would stand on the biggest stages in the world: Wembley Stadium, the Rose Bowl, the United Nations General Assembly, and still crack a joke that made 70,000 people laugh, not because he didn't understand the gravity of the moment, but because he understood that sometimes the bravest thing you can do in a moment of overwhelming pressure is to remind everyone, including yourself, that joy is the whole point. Psy latched onto this because Psy himself operates on a remarkably similar philosophy. People forget that Gangnam Style is, at its core, a satire. It's a comedic critique of the flashy, materialistic culture of Seoul's Gangtown district, delivered through absurdist humor and an intentionally ridiculous music video. Psy weaponized comedy the same way Jin weaponizes charm, as a Trojan horse for deeper substance. And when Psy recognized that pattern in Jin, he didn't hold back. He said something to the effect that in an industry full of artists trying desperately to look cool, Jin had the audacity to prioritize being warm, and that audacity, the willingness to be the funny one, the caring one, the one who doesn't take himself too seriously in a field that takes itself too seriously, was a form of artistic rebellion that most people didn't even recognize as rebellion because it came wrapped in a smile and a flying kiss. But Psy also touched on something else about Jin that caught everyone off guard: his vocals. Now, Jin's vocal ability has been a topic of passionate debate among music fans for years, but Psy cut through all of it with a single observation that honestly reshaped how a lot of people heard Jin's voice after that. Psy pointed out that Jin's voice has a quality that is incredibly rare in K-pop: vulnerability. Not weakness, not fragility, vulnerability, the willingness to let the cracks show. When Jin sings Epiphany, his solo track that became an anthem for self-love and self-acceptance, there are moments where his voice doesn't hit with the polished precision of a technically perfect vocalist, and Psy argued that those moments are exactly what makes the performance devastating. Because you're not listening to a machine executing a melody, you're listening to a human being laying their emotional truth on a stage and trusting the audience to receive it gently. Psy compared it to his own experience performing Father, a deeply personal track he released about his relationship with his dad, a song that required him to abandon every comedic defense mechanism he'd spent years building and just stand there, raw, in front of an audience, hoping the honesty was enough. Psy said he recognized that same energy in Jin, that same willingness to be exposed, and he called it one of the most underappreciated qualities in all of modern K-pop. And here's what really seals this moment. Jin's confidence, the very trait Psy zeroed in on, was ultimately tested in one of the most profound ways possible when Jin became one of the first BTS members to enlist for mandatory military service in South Korea. In December 2022, Jin entered the military, stepping away from the biggest music act on the planet at the height of their cultural dominance. And he did it the way he does everything, with grace, with humor, and with that unmistakable Jin energy that tells the world, I know exactly who I am, and wherever I go, that doesn't change. Psy, who completed his own military service years earlier, understood the weight of that moment better than most commentators ever could. So number 6, Jin, the man who turned confidence into a compass, humor into armor, and warmth into the most quietly revolutionary act in K-pop history. But don't get too comfortable, because the member coming up at number 5, Psy said something about them that made an entire room full of music producers go dead silent. And when producers go silent, you know something real just happened. Stay locked in.
Number 5, Suga, the musical genius who made a legend feel young again. You know, when the news first broke in 2022 that Min Youngi, our very own Suga, the resident genius producer of BTS, was collaborating with the absolute icon PSY for his comeback track, That. The K-pop community didn't just freak out, they were utterly flabbergasted because this was the ultimate collision of two completely different musical worlds. But what truly shook ARMY to the absolute core wasn't just the catchy beat or the chaotic music video, it was the emotional revelation PSY made about Suga's actual character behind the studio doors that changed how the entire industry views him. See, Suga has this reputation of being the quiet, mysterious, deeply introspective member of BTS, the guy who spends countless sleepless nights locked away in his private studio, the Genius Lab, drinking endless cups of black coffee and pouring his rawest, darkest, and most personal struggles into his music under his solo alias Auguste, so nobody ever expected him to suddenly partner up with the king of loud, theatrical, and brilliantly ridiculous performance art that is PSY. But when PSY sat down for his promotional interviews, he looked genuinely emotional and told a story that left everyone in the room completely silent, explaining that when Suga first reached out to him saying he had produced a track specifically with PSY in mind, PSY was actually incredibly intimidated because BTS was already the biggest musical force on the planet, and he expected Suga to be this untouchable, highly formal superstar who would just send a digital audio file, collect his royalties, and go about his day. Instead, Youngi showed up in person, sat down with PSY, and immediately shattered South Korea's extremely strict cultural norms regarding age and seniority. Norms that usually dictate a junior artist must act incredibly reserved and deferential to a senior who has been in the industry for over 2 decades by treating PSY not like a legendary monument to be feared, but like a true partner. A childhood hero, and a brother in arms who shared the exact same burning passion for making people dance. PSY confessed that at that point in his career, he had been feeling an immense, almost paralyzing pressure, constantly worrying if his best days were behind him and if he would ever be able to recreate the global magic of his past hits. But the moment he started talking to Youngie about music, he felt this sudden, electric spark that he hadn't felt in years because Suga's enthusiasm was so incredibly pure and infectious that it completely bypassed the 16-year age gap between them. PSY literally said that working with Suga felt like he had traveled back in time to when he was first starting out, reminding him of the simple joy of creating music for the sheer fun of it without worrying about charts, metrics, or public expectations. And that is a massive statement because it means a member of BTS didn't just write a hit song for PSY, he actually helped save a legendary artist's creative soul from a deep, silent slump. To understand why this is so profound, you have to look at Youngie's history, starting as a hungry, underground rapper named Gloss in the city of Daegu. A kid who was so desperately broke that he constantly had to choose between paying for a cheap bowl of noodles or buying a bus ticket home after spending all night producing tracks in a tiny, unheated studio that barely had working equipment. He was a teenager who faced immense skepticism from his own family, who had to work exhausting part-time jobs as a delivery rider just to survive in Seoul, which led to that devastating shoulder accident where he was hit by a car. An injury he hid from his agency for a long time out of the terrifying fear that they would discard him and cancel his debut, meaning he spent years performing some of the most grueling, high-intensity choreography in K-pop while quietly enduring excruciating physical pain until he finally had major surgery in 2020. PSY saw that grit, that raw survival instinct, and realized that Suga's genius wasn't just a product of natural talent, but the result of a kid who had literally bled, sweated, and fought his way through the darkest corners of the industry to earn his place at the table, which is why PSY respected him so deeply that he didn't just want Suga's beat, he wanted Suga himself. Originally, Youngie was only supposed to produce the track and stay safely behind the scenes, but PSY, with his signature playful persistence, slowly coaxed him into featuring on the song, then convinced him to star in the music video, and finally persuaded him to learn the incredibly fast-paced, high-energy choreography, leading to that iconic, unforgettable moment in the music video where Youngie, dressed in a Wild West cowboy outfit, dramatically slaps PSY across the face and starts dancing. With this giant, unbridled, and radiant smile that ARMYs had rarely seen in BTS's intense, conceptually heavy group performances. PSY pointed out that during the music video shoot, he watched Suga closely and realized that despite his cool, detached, and savage exterior, Youngie is actually someone who is deeply, passionately in love with the stage and possesses an innate, natural charm that commands the attention of every single person in the room the second the music starts playing, proving that he is not just a mastermind behind the mixing board, but a born performer who can hold his own next to the most energetic showman in the country. This revelation completely blew the minds of fans because it showed a side of Youngie that he rarely displays, a deeply warm, incredibly supportive, and humble junior who is willing to step completely out of his comfort zone, put on a cowboy hat, and do silly dances just to uplift a senior artist he respected, proving that his loyalty and artistic integrity are absolute. PSY's reflections on Suga showed that Youngie's true legacy isn't just his ability to top the Billboard charts or sell out stadiums, but his unique capacity to heal other artists through his craft, acting as a bridge between the founding generation of the global Hallyu wave and the modern era, showing that no matter how famous or successful BTS becomes, they remain grounded in the pure, unfiltered love for the music. And that is exactly why PSY's words about Min Youngie left such a lasting, emotional impact on everyone who heard them. Number 4, RM, the leader who bears a burden that would crush anyone else. If there is one person in the entire music industry who truly understands the terrifying, suffocating reality of global virality, it is PSY. The man who overnight became a household name across the planet and experienced the dizzying heights and the crushing lows of sudden international fame, which is exactly why his comments about BTS's leader, RM Kim Namjoon, struck such a deep, emotional chord with ARMY and the entire K-pop industry. During a candid broadcast discussion about the global impact of K-pop, PSY didn't just give a generic nod to BTS's success. Instead, he zeroed in on RM and made a confession that was so raw and honest it sent shivers down the spines of everyone listening. PSY admitted that when Gangnam Style exploded in 2012, he felt like he was constantly running on a treadmill that was moving too fast, suffocating under the immense daily pressure to follow up on a historic viral miracle. And he openly stated that if he felt that level of psychological exhaustion from just one global hit, he could not even begin to fathom the Titanic, mind-numbing weight that Namjoon carries on his shoulders every single day as the leader of a group that has sustained that level of global mania for years on end. PSY's words shocked fans because they pulled back the shiny, glittering curtain of BTS's international dominance to reveal the invisible, silent burden of leadership that Namjoon has had to carry since he was just a young man in his early 20s. Think about the sheer magnitude of RM's role. When BTS first began to break into the Western music market, they didn't have a massive entourage of native English speakers or international PR firms to guide them through the minefield of American media. They had Namjoon, a self-taught English speaker who had learned the language as a boy by watching DVDs of the American sitcom Friends in his bedroom. Suddenly, this young man was thrust into the spotlight of major American talk shows, face to face with interviewers who often treated the group with a mix of condescension, sarcasm, or outright ignorance, viewing them as a passing novelty. Namjoon had to sit there, under the blinding studio lights, constantly translating complex questions in his head, formulating eloquent and respectful answers that protected the dignity of his members, and translating them back, all while maintaining a calm, smiling, and unflappable composure, knowing that a single slip of the tongue or a slight mistranslation could spark an international media controversy and destroy the dreams his group had worked so hard to achieve. PSY recognized this Herculean effort, pointing out that RM doesn't just act as a leader in the traditional sense, but as a diplomat, a cultural translator, and a human shield for his members, absorbing the pressure, the criticism, and the exhausting demands of global representation so his brothers can focus on their art. This deep empathy from PSY makes complete sense when you look at Namjoon's origin story as Runch Randa, the brilliant underground rapper from Ilsan who possessed an IQ of 148 and scored in the top 1.3% of the entire nation in his high school university entrance exams. A kid who could have easily chosen a life of academic prestige and societal security, but chose the unstable, chaotic path of hip-hop because music was the only language that made his heart beat. When he joined Big Hit and became the very first member of BTS, he faced harsh criticism from the underground scene for selling out to become a K-pop idol, while simultaneously facing rejection from the idol industry for not fitting the hyper-polished, conventional standards of visual beauty. He was told he didn't belong, he was criticized for his looks, and he was constantly forced to defend his legitimacy as an artist, a struggle that PSY, who also faced massive societal backlash and criticism for his unconventional appearance and rebellious lyrics early in his career, understood on a cellular level. PSY remarked that RM's true genius lies not just in his intellectual capacity to speak at the United Nations General Assembly, where he delivered that legendary "Speak Yourself" speech in 2018 that inspired millions of youth worldwide, but in his deep, artistic vulnerability, specifically praising RM's solo albums like Mono and Indigo for their raw honesty, where Namjoon openly struggles with the loneliness, the isolation, and the identity crisis of being a global icon while still trying to remain a regular human being who loves art, nature, and simple bicycle rides. PSY noted that RM's leadership is defined by this quiet resilience and self-reflection, describing him as a leader who doesn't rule from a pedestal but leads from the front lines, carrying the heavy crown of BTS's legacy with a grace and maturity that is almost unnatural for someone his age. And this public acknowledgement from a senior industry pioneer served as a powerful reminder to the world that behind BTS's historic achievements lies the silent sacrifice of a leader who chose to carry the weight of an entire generation so his team could fly. Number 3. Jimin, the dancer whose soul bleeds onto the stage. When you talk about the art of performance, there are dancers who memorize steps and execute them with flawless precision. And then there is Park Jimin, a man who doesn't just dance, but literally paints raw, unfiltered human emotion into the very air around him, a mesmerizing quality that PSY, the master of theatrical stagecraft, recognized and commented on in a way that left ARMY deeply emotional and forever changed how people perceive Jimin's artistic genius. PSY, who has spent over 2 decades observing the rise and fall of countless talents in the Korean entertainment industry, pointed out that Jimin possesses a rare, almost hypnotic aura that bridges the gap between elite classical fine art and mainstream global pop, creating a visual drama that is absolutely impossible to look away from once he steps under the spotlight. PSY confessed that watching Jimin perform tracks like Black Swan or Lie was not like watching a typical K-pop idol stage, but was rather akin to witnessing a tragic, beautifully painful theatrical play where every single tilt of the head, every fluid extension of the fingertips, and every gravity-defying leap into the air carried a profound narrative weight that felt almost spiritual in its intensity. PSY's comments shocked fans because they validated a truth that ARMYs had always felt in their hearts, but could never quite put into words, that Jimin's dancing is not merely a physical skill he practiced, but a form of emotional vulnerability where he literally allows his soul to bleed onto the stage for the audience to see. PSY highlighted that while modern K-pop choreography is heavily celebrated for its rigid, razor-sharp synchronization and aggressive hip-hop energy, Jimin introduces a fluid, contemporary grace that softens the edges of BTS's performances, elevating the entire group's visual aesthetic to a level of high art that is rarely seen in the commercial pop world. To truly understand the depth of what PSY was praising, you have to look at the incredibly grueling, almost agonizing journey Jimin took to get here. Beginning in Busan, where he was a prodigy who entered the prestigious Busan High School of Arts as the top student in the modern dance department, a historic milestone for a young boy passionate about contemporary dance. However, when he decided to pursue his dream of becoming an idol and joined Big Hit Entertainment, he was suddenly thrown into a harsh, alien world where his classical training was viewed with skepticism, as the company wasn't sure if his soft, expressive movements could ever blend with BTS's tough hip-hop identity, leading to the heartbreaking revelation that Jimin was on the chopping block and came close to being kicked out of the group as many as 15 times during his trainee days. Driven by a fierce, desperate determination to prove he belonged, Jimin pushed his body to the absolute limits of human endurance, adopting a brutal routine where he would survive on only 2 hours of sleep a night, practicing in the dark dance rooms until the sun rose and his muscles literally gave out, while simultaneously skipping meals to lose weight because of a deep-seated insecurity that he wasn't visually good enough to stand alongside his members. This raw, terrifying work ethic is what PSY, a veteran who knows the true cost of staying at the top, found so deeply moving about Jimin, noting that you can see this history of silent struggle and dedication in the way he performs today, as if every single stage could be his last and he must empty his entire being into that performance. PSY also commented on Jimin's legendary duality, the baffling, almost surreal contrast between the soft, incredibly polite, and giggly Busan boy off stage and the fiercely charismatic, dangerous, and completely dominant performer on stage, comparing it to a state of artistic possession where Jimin completely surrenders his ego to the music, pulling the audience into his emotional universe through intense, direct eye contact that refuses to let them go. This public praise from a legendary pioneer like PSY served as a beautiful, profound acknowledgement of the immense physical and emotional price Jimin pays for his art, reminding the world that his ethereal grace on stage is not just natural talent, but the hard-won victory of a boy who chose to burn his own youth as fuel to create a light that now heals and inspires millions of people across the globe. Number 2. V. The cinematic soul whose very glance tells a story. In the glittering, high-speed world of K-pop, where idols are trained to maintain perfect smiles and execute highly stylized, commercial routines, Kim Taehyung, our beloved V, stands out like a classic black and white movie playing in a room full of neon screens. And when PSY, a man who knows exactly what it takes to capture the attention of the entire planet, commented on V's unique, natural star power, it sent shockwaves through the fandom because it revealed a level of artistic respect that goes far deeper than V's world-famous visual appearance. The friendship between these two came to light in a major way back in 2020 when a photo of V and PSY hugging warmly went absolutely viral, showing a genuine, affectionate bond that surprised many. But it was PSY's subsequent remarks about Taehyung's performance style that truly opened people's eyes to V's artistic genius. PSY pointed out that V possesses a rare, unteachable quality that he called cinematic presence, explaining that when Taehyung is on stage, he doesn't just perform choreography. He acts out a film, using his legendary facial expressions, subtle shifts in posture, and a single, soul-stirring glance to convey a complex web of emotions that tells a story without him needing to speak a single word. PSY's comments shocked ARMY because they perfectly articulated the hypnotic, theatrical nature of V's performances, showing that Taehyung's ability to go from a fierce, predatory gaze to a soft, boxy smile is not a practiced gimmick, but the natural expression of a deeply artistic, old soul who views the stage as a canvas for storytelling. PSY noted that while most K-pop artists strive for technical perfection, V embraces the beauty of imperfection, choosing to sing in his rich, deep, and velvet baritone voice. A vocal range that is incredibly rare in the high-pitched world of male K-pop vocals, and delivering performances that feel spontaneous, organic, and loaded with a nostalgic, jazz-inspired soul. To truly appreciate why PSY's analysis is so profound, you have to look at Taehyung's humble beginnings as a farm boy from Daegu, raised by his loving grandparents in the countryside, a sweet, curious child who grew up thinking he was destined to be a farmer until his father, who always supported his dreams, encouraged him to learn the saxophone if he wanted to pursue music. This background grounded Taehyung in a deep appreciation for the simple, beautiful things in life, like looking at the sky, listening to old vinyl records, and playing jazz, which gave him a completely different artistic perspective from other trainees who had spent their entire youth inside urban dance academies. But his path was far from easy. When he joined Big Hit, he was kept as BTS's hidden member until their debut, meaning that while the other members were building connections with fans through daily video logs and social media updates, Taehyung had to stand quietly by the studio trash can or watch from a corner, completely hidden from the public eye out of the company's fear that rival agencies would scout him. A lonely and confusing experience for a young teenager who wanted nothing more than to share his passion with the world. When he was finally revealed, his striking visuals and deep voice immediately captivated fans, but he had to work tirelessly to prove that he was more than just a handsome face, eventually making his acting debut in the historical drama, Warang, and writing beautiful, self-produced indie soul tracks like Scenery and Winter Bear. PSY recognized this artistic depth, noting that V's stage presence is heavily influenced by his love for classic cinema, art, and vintage music, which allows him to bring a mature, slow-burning charisma to high-energy BTS songs like Singularity or On, making him a performer who doesn't just entertain, but actually moves the heart of the viewer. PSY's words serve as a powerful reminder that V's true magic lies in his authenticity, his willingness to resist the pressure of conforming to the standard idol mold and instead share his genuine, eccentric, and beautiful soul with the world. proving that he is a once-in-a-generation artist whose cinematic vision will continue to leave a lasting mark on the music world long after the stage lights go down. Number 1. Jungkook, the golden standard who left a legend in utter awe. And here we are, at the absolute pinnacle of our list, the number 1 spot that belongs to none other than Jungkook, the legendary Golden Maknae of BTS, a young man who has spent his entire youth in the blinding spotlight of global fame. And when PSY, the undisputed godfather of K-pop's international breakthrough, spoke about Jungkook, his comments did not just shock ARMY, they resonated as a profound, industry-defining validation of what makes Jungkook a once-in-a-century artistic phenomenon. PSY, who has watched the evolution of the Korean music industry from its early days to its current global dominance, made a statement during a major music panel that left everyone in the room completely spellbound, as he openly declared that Jungkook represents the absolute pinnacle of the K-pop training system, possessing a level of performance stability that is so incredibly refined it borders on the inhuman. PSY pointed out that while many performers can either sing beautifully or dance aggressively, Jungkook does both simultaneously at a world-class level, maintaining absolute studio record vocal pitch and breath control while executing some of the most physically demanding, high-speed choreographies ever created, and doing it all with a relaxed, smiling ease that makes the impossible look completely effortless. PSY's words sent shockwaves through the fandom because they cut straight to the core of Jungkook's unique genius. It wasn't just praise for his talent, but a deep, professional recognition of the sheer, unimaginable physical and mental discipline required to perform at that level of perfection night after night on global stadium tours. PSY noted that what makes Jungkook truly terrifying as an artist is not just his natural-born gifts, but his mindset, describing him as the rare kind of genius who works as if he has no talent at all, constantly pushing himself to the point of exhaustion in search of self-improvement, even when the entire world is already declaring him the best. To understand the emotional weight behind PSY's awe, you have to look at the beautiful, often heartbreaking journey of this boy from Busan, who at the tender age of just 15 left his family and his hometown to move to the sprawling, intimidating city of Seoul after auditioning for the talent show Superstar K. Although he didn't win the show, his raw potential was so obvious that he was flooded with contract offers from 7 of the biggest, most established entertainment agencies in South Korea. But in a twist of fate that changed the course of music history, he rejected all of them and chose the small, struggling startup Big Hit Entertainment simply because he saw RM rapping in a practice room and thought he was the coolest person he had ever seen. When he first arrived as a trainee, Jungkook was so incredibly shy and introverted that he would literally wait for the other members to fall asleep before he would take a shower or eat. And he would cry in the vocal room whenever he was asked to sing because he was terrified of his own voice. Recognizing his potential, the agency sent him to Los Angeles to study various dance styles under world-class choreographers, a trip that sparked his passion and transformed him from a shy boy into the explosive, magnetic center of BTS, who would go on to main vocalist status and lead dancer duties. His 6 older members essentially raised him, feeding him, walking him to school, and protecting him from the harsh realities of the industry, which is why Jungkook's entire identity is deeply woven with the love of his brothers. Once famously writing his solo track, Begin, to express that his only true pain in life is seeing his Hyung suffer. As he transitioned into his solo era, releasing the global smash hit 7 and his record-breaking album, Golden, the pressure on his shoulders reached a fever pitch, yet he continued to perform with the same humility, bowing 90 degrees to staff, cleaning up trash on music show sets, and constantly thanking fans during live broadcasts in the middle of the night. PSY recognized this beautiful humility, stating that despite being the Golden Maknae, who can do absolutely everything from singing and dancing to producing, filmmaking, and athletics, Jungkook has never allowed fame to corrupt his pure, childlike love for his craft, remaining the same hard-working boy who joined the group years ago. PSY's profound commentary serves as the ultimate tribute to Jungkook, cementing his status as the gold standard of modern music, a legendary performer who conquered the world not by demanding respect, but by earning it through relentless dedication, unmatched talent, and a heart that remains forever humble.